on my computer. And now I'm going to share my screen. And I'm gonna wonder what this is gonna do. Oh, there we go. Whoops, that didn't work out like I wanted it to. That's what I wanted
We went straight to Q&A.
to. Yeah, yeah, I'm challenged here. So, hi everybody, and welcome to the webinar. The title of this webinar is "Show Up, Speak Up, Shut Up: How to Be a Good Ally," and we're going to talk about ways that we can be a good ally to people in communities that um, uh, don't perhaps get the attention that they should be getting. So this presentation was developed for with the people on the autism spectrum in mind, but I think that the principles that we're going to talk about today can pretty much apply to a lot of different um, groups that need better representation. All right, I've got takeaways for you. At the end of the webinar, I want you, I want us all to understand our privilege and how we can use it for good, not for evil. We're going to talk about who can be an ally, and we're going to talk about what allyship will look like. So get your thinking caps on. We're going to have a discussion. Sort of the agenda here, we're going to talk about models of diversity, different ways to look at diversity. We're going to try to get an understanding of our privilege, and we're going to talk about who can be an ally and what allyship should look like. Then I'll talk to you a little bit about some of the resources that we have available to us. And then we'll have Q&A if you want, or you can just jump in with your questions or just jump in with your thoughts. I would really like for this to be a conversation. So here's the picture that shows the difference between diversity and inclusion. It's not enough to just be diverse, but we have to have people plugged in. You know, we have to have them feel like they're part of the community and they're contributing, right? And then this one demonstrates what the difference between equality and equity is. Some people do need extra services and extra help. And because like the little boy can't see over the fence here when we're all equal. And of course, the best thing in this case, I say tear down the fence, right? Empowerment. So we're going to talk about models of diversity. So there's this biological model, especially like if it applies to people on the autism spectrum. They want to try to cure autism. And like my son is on the spectrum, he would not he would not ask to be neurotypical ever. He really likes himself the way that he is. And so we don't want to try to cure him. Also, say you have somebody that's from out of the country, maybe you want to try to help them sound American so that people will treat them better. That's sort of the biological model. But there's another way of looking at diversity from a social point of view, right? We want to make sure that we figure out all the ways in which society is exclusive and try to get rid of those. How can we increase services and accommodations, and how can we uh, reduce the oppression and letting go of our questionable norms? So, for example, people on the autism spectrum, they have superpowers and they have kryptonite, and we want to try to help them deal with their kryptonite, make sure that we have used their superpowers and let them shine. All right, so we've got a definition. I'm getting an echo. There we go. Let's see if we still have the echo. No, perfect. Oh, we do. Still have the echo. Technology. It's crazy.
It looks like Wade B's second sign-in needs to mute.
Oh, yeah, if you have two devices going, one of them has to be quiet. So, all right, so we've got this social model, and we also want to consider an acceptance of our differences, right? Neurodiversity is a good thing. Color appreciation rather than color blindness. We want to make sure that we appreciate people for their differences because we're all stronger when we appreciate one another. All right, I'm going to ask you guys because you all have microphone rights if you want them. Um, let's talk about privilege. What are some of the ways that we experience privilege? And I'll look at the chat. You can type it into the chat if you want, or you can unmute yourself and use your voice. Oh, Cheryl raised her hands. Go ahead.
So like having an educational degree
Yeah.
is privileged because you have better opportunities.
Yep. It's definitely, and just having access to better education is a privilege, right? Having people in your life that have modeled better education is a privilege. Not everybody has that. Very good.
Very,
So,
very true.
yeah, it can be obvious and systematic, or systemic, like you were talking about, Cheryl. Education, healthcare, employment. It can also be subtle, person to person, like lack of empathy, wanting people to meet our social norms. Um, Sometimes, especially like with the handicapped, they are stripped of their actual sexuality. We look on them as though they're child, uh, children, and that's definitely a display of our privilege. And then also being seen as an inspiration can be a display of privilege, right? Like, oh, well, for a fat girl, you sure dress nice, right?
Mhm.
Having a privilege of working and having a roof over my head, good one, Lauren, and having the means and equipment to work and learn remotely. Exactly, that's definitely a privilege because you have to have sort of a work at home friendly job. Not everybody has one of those. Beautiful, you guys got good ideas. Um, and the third bullet, self-awareness is hard. Knowing your own privilege is a challenge. Oh, being able to afford a car. Good one, Carolyn. Because, like, right now, I am practically living out of my car when my presence in the outside world is basically me behind the wheel.
Hmm.
Like, if I go to the, yesterday I went to the pharmacy and I didn't have to get out of my car. But what if somebody doesn't have a car? All right, this is a trick question. Who can be an ally, you guys? Yep, exactly. Marcia, perfect. Oh yeah, you guys know this one. That's good. Very good. So yeah, who could be an ally? Anyone with privilege on a particular access. And what does allyship look like? Do you guys have ideas of how allyship could look? I like everybody's answers. All right, so allyship should be personal. We should take action to be a good ally, and not just wait for it to sort of fall on us. It should not be performative. We should not be being a good ally just because it makes you look like a good person. You should genuinely care about people in your community. And so you need to check in about the intent and the impact of your actions. Oh yeah, support direct participation. Yep, ask for someone's direct participation in an activity and support. Very good. And one more time for the people in the back, self-awareness is hard. It really is. So I promised you 8 different ways that we can be a better ally. We're going to talk about educating ourselves. We're going to talk about sharing what we know. We're going to talk about amplifying the diverse voices and perspectives in the community. We're going to talk about how we can support the livelihood of diverse people. We're going to remember that diverse people are individuals. We're going to support diverse people that we know. We're going to celebrate accomplishments, and we're going to know that allyship is a growing process. So let's talk about each of those. The first one, educate yourself. What kinds of things can you do to educate yourself? And I'm looking in the chat, but you also have microphone rights if you want to speak up.
Well, there's always the internet to find out more about any particular situation.
Internet's a really good resource. Yep. And what are we looking for online? Books. Perfect, Cindy Powell. Movies. I know during the George Floyd kind of week of just despair and everyone really wanted to know what they could do. I watched a ton of movies because my friends had suggested, this watch 13 was a really good movie, and Just Mercy was a really good movie.
Mhm.
And oh yeah, Ask Others, very good, Robert Hirschnow. So some of the ways that I suggest that we could webinars like this, very good, Marianne. Yep. We can read. We can ask people in the diverse community, but before you do that, be sure that you've done your homework. Don't make them do the emotional work for you. Learn about your own privilege, and then um, get to know what's going on in their world, or what you can find out from the voices within that community. And I'm going to tell a story, Chris Scott. We're going to learn about our privileged language. So Chris Scott is my pastor, and I'm so glad he's here today. We've got a bunch of outspoken women in our congregation, and every now and then, Chris visits different churches. Social media, beautiful, and develop a personal relationship. I love you guys' ideas. So we've got a lot of outspoken women. And so we were going to get T-shirts that said the uppity women of the exchange. That's our church's name. Our church's name, the exchange. Well, it turns out uppity is a racist word. So we had to scramble and try to find an alternative for that word. We wanted the meaning of being rebelliously self-assertive. So that's what we put on the shirts. We put the rebelliously self-assertive women of the exchange on our t-shirts because we were about to do something bad. We were about to use some privileged language, and we didn't want to do that, and certainly not put it on a shirt. So you can also check out organizations that are involved in advocacy for that community. I'll tell another story about Chris. Chris is the president this year of the Valley Interfaith organization in Winchester. Excuse me. And they had a town hall about social justice. And so it's a way that we can get involved is to attend things like that, educate ourselves, hear stories from within the community. It was a really good day. Good job. And ask yourself which organizations align with the group. And then you can go to their websites. You can go to their meetings. Oh, sorry. Cindy Powell said, cough into my sleeve. I'm sorry. You can also maybe if they're a nonprofit, you can support them financially as you learn from them. So those are ways that we can educate ourselves. And now share what we know, right? We've already talked about social media. What other things can we do as we're learning? Then we can start sharing with people.
I was going to say, Vicky, I like what you've done with your with your email signature. You add links to more information, like when you put your pronouns.
Yeah,
It's like, ask me why I do this, and it links to an article.
yeah, and that is, let's just go ahead and talk about that. When people in the LGBTQ community decide to share their pronouns, if they don't match what they look like, if they want to be they them, or if they're got a woman's name but they want to be he him, that is a big vulnerable time for them. And so if those of us for which this costs nothing and it means very little. Carolyn's got hers shared like that. If we go ahead and start sharing, then when they're ready to disclose that they want different pronouns, it won't look so weird. So everybody, I encourage you to go ahead and share your pronouns. I shared in my email signature. I've got it here on my Zoom. And so let's talk about having conversations, right? Obviously, we can have conversations here on Zoom. We can talk to our family and friends. We can have conversations at work. Um, we can have conversation in public venues, and I will tell you another story about my church. And we can have conversations on social media because that changes people's minds, right? Not, but people learn, I think, by making relationships. So, yes, somebody types into the chat wrong. Um, So, Chris and I are representing our church on the Virginia Mennonite Conference, and even though we're not in that, we're not gay ourselves, we still represent a lot of the members of our church are in that community, and we need to be good voices for them and have those uncomfortable conversations. Right now, the conference that we have does not support for instance, if Chris performs a same-sex marriage, he can lose his credentials. And we want to make sure that we keep that conversation going to maybe change some hearts, change some opinions, make it safe for people that agree with us to speak up if we speak up first. So those are the conversations we want to be having. And we want to amplify the diverse voices and perspectives. So what are some ways that we can do that? Yeah, tough and real
So,
conversations. That's right, Chris.
um, when we talk about, yeah, crud, now I can't remember the words.
Go ahead. You want me to go back?
Sorry. No.
Okay.
It's me. Well, I guess it's when the voices talk about their perspectives, do we identify and say, oh, so Vicky said that gay or same-sex marriage is okay. Vicky is a lesbian. Do we is that what we do?
So that is a risk, right? If you, and it would be fine for people to think I'm a lesbian. I've had people think I'm a lesbian before, and I just tell them no. I like boys. So, um,
I'm sorry, that was like what came into my head at the moment.
yeah.
Not anyway.
Well, that is a risk. Yeah. So we look for opportunities to make a space for the diverse people to share their thoughts and share their voices. And you ask yourself, where can the voice be heard? Sorry, something is blocking my screen and I can't read what I wrote over there. But I can move it. There we go. Sorry. Um, so find a way for yourself to step back so that their voice could be heard. I want to tell you a little bit about my experience with the Black History Month celebration at American Woodmark this year. I was very involved on that committee, and sorry, I'm coughing because I'm talking. So yeah, I was very involved in that committee, and I did a lot of behind the scenes kind of stuff, right? To make it easier for the people in the Black community to be on stage. So I did like shopping, bought tablecloths, made a SharePoint site for them, for us. Um, did a lot of working behind the scenes, doing email. We were lucky enough to get the local high school choir to come, and they did an hour-long performance, and they were awesome. So I did like the email back and forth and just making sure that everybody knew where to be and where to park the school buses, that kind of, the behind the scenes kind of stuff. So be wary of positioning yourself as a leader of the conversation. And I'll tell another story about Chris at my church. The Virginia Mennonite Conference is working on a strategy, and one of the strategies that they had was to increase the diversity and inclusion. And they specifically named groups that they were going to try to reach out to. And missing from that list was the LGBTQ community. And so we spoke up in that meeting, but we wanted to make sure that the members of our community in the LGBTQ community had the opportunity to speak for themselves. And Chris did get a lot of good feedback from that community, which is good. But if we didn't ask for it, we wouldn't get it. So we want to make sure it's not the white lady, the straight white lady doing all the talking.
Mhm.
So, and we can use our privilege to ask for more representation in mainstream media. Starting to get more people with autism on in movies and books and things like that, but it's still pretty rare. And we can ask for that, the whole Oscar so white thing. Um, we point out that we're not seeing the faces that we want to be seeing, and
Mhm.
asking for people to participate. And then we can credit diverse people and then compensate them. We want to, if you have a good input, we want to make sure you get paid for that. And that includes emotional work. So what do you guys think about that? Got any other ways that we could make space for diverse voices? And then
I
this
think
one
some of the
is
biggest
kind of, sorry, go ahead.
no, you may have said this early on. I came in a few minutes late, but I think maybe one of the biggest things is just to be careful of not making assumptions ever, then enacting on our assumptions. Maybe that was the first thing that you said.
I did not say that at all. So thank you. That's very good. We have to do that work to educate ourselves.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I carry lots of assumptions that need to be.
Oh,
I-
well,
yeah.
we all do. We
Yeah.
can't, I mean, we deal with the world based on what we know from previous experience, and that's how we form those assumptions.
Yep.
But it can get us into trouble.
What I've been thinking lately about how to encourage diversity and inclusion. Let's say you're in charge of a group of people and you really don't want to do all of the work yourself. You don't want to be controlling and in charge of everything, but you have to give sort of some kind of rules or some kind of activity that everybody has to do. I think that the way to help is to like democratize it in some manner. I think the more that we control things ourselves at the top, I mean, I think that you need to have that guidance. You need to have like a steady hand running something, let's say it's STC, but you want to have a way for people to do things differently, to like roll it out differently. And I do think that for the most part, we do that, but because we have so many different ways that things can be acceptable, we just have like goals for them to meet, but we don't care how they do it. But I do like the idea of allowing other, in terms of listening and allowing people to have a voice, like find a vehicle for them to do that. Like, let's say encouraging more people to give a webinar like this one, where they are talking about their own specialty, like sign up here, and like having this be easy. I think that sometimes it's hard to step up and to let your voice be heard. It a lot of us would rather not speak in public. You know what I mean? We would rather not have our voice heard because we're so afraid of rejection. So making it easier to sign up to do something and having a time when people can listen to you without judgment, that's like the goal.
That's so true,
I
Carolyn.
think that would overcome, some of the I think there's a lot of barriers to speaking up, either because that's just the way that you are, or there's actual structural barriers,
Yeah.
that people say, no, we only want the number one top senior people to talk. I've always felt that, like when I was junior on a lot of teams, I just never felt like I could talk in front of anybody else. But anyway, I just feel like reducing those barriers and welcoming people in. And I know that you do that, Vicky, so well.
Thank you. I think um, that means a lot coming from you, Carolyn, because you're kind of my mentor. Chris Scott says, ask questions in the chat. And Cheryl says, we shouldn't act on assumptions, but let people show us who they are. Exactly. I like. You guys are smart. So we're going to buy things from diversity-owned businesses, artists, and share our favorites with others. I put a couple of websites here. The Hideaway Cafe is a little coffee shop in Winchester, and it is owned by a woman who's very gender fluid. And before the pandemic, that's where we met. And we wanted to make a welcoming space. And her philosophy is that she wants to make a welcoming space for people to come in and hang out. And so that's the Hideaway Cafe. And then the Walk Zone's one of my favorite mom and pop Asian fusion restaurants. I just like to support them whenever I can because their food is so good. And we want to make sure that people are compensated for their work, especially their intelligent and also their intellectual and their emotional work, not just their physical work. We want to make sure we hire diverse people, and we might have to specifically go looking for them. And then this is a little website. This STEMtastic website is the coolest. It's owned and operated by people on the spectrum, and it has these fantastic toys. Let's see. What did I do with it? Anyway, they have all these STEM toys because if you're on the autism spectrum, you need ways to safely STEM. Or you could walk around the house all the time like my son does, just singing. Okay, now we're going to remember that diverse people are individuals. And when, like as Cheryl said, let people tell us who they are. So let's talk a little bit about the vulnerability of sharing a diagnosis. Let's say you're someone on the spectrum, or let's say you're someone who struggles with suicide, or somebody that has sort of an invisible disability. It is so vulnerable for them to share their diagnosis. But I think it's important that we treat that with respect, right? If somebody tells you they're on the spectrum, I mean, once there's a vaccine, you should give them a hug for that because that took a lot of courage to share your diagnosis. I have a friend who is on the spectrum and he lost his job because he refused to share his diagnosis at work. He was an IT support kind of a person. And so when he worked with people, they were having one of their worst days, right? When your computer's not working right, you're having a bad day. And so
Mhm.
it's kind of stressful for him. And so one of the ways that he cared for himself was after a encounter like that, he would just go for a walk. And so his supervisors were like, "Well, we can't find you. You know, where are you going?" But if he had shared his diagnosis and said, "Look, I'm on the autism spectrum. This is how I need to regroup. This is how I need to care for myself to get myself back together so that I can continue working." By law, we would have had to have accommodated that. But because he was not willing to self disclose, he lost his job. And that was really sad.
That's awful.
Yeah, it is awful. Um, so, anyway, we want to treat people with respect, especially when they're
I'm not
being
on the
vulnerable.
spectrum, but as a former help desk person, I understand how stressful that is. Sometimes I had to get up and take a walk.
Yep. It's a good point. And even for people not on the spectrum, we need to care for ourselves, right? And all individuals are going to be different, right? As Cheryl said, we shouldn't be making assumptions. We should let people tell us who they are and not assume that a person is one way just because they belong to a certain population. And then we need to ask questions, as Chris Scott said. We want to make sure that we ask people what can increase their comfort. What kinds of things am I doing that's making you uncomfortable? So I can be aware of them now and stop doing them. What kind of things do you need for me to do to make you feel more comfortable? And we want to support all the diverse people that we know. So we can use our privilege to draw attention when they're not getting the attention that they deserve. As like in the example of the Black History Month, I use my privilege to make SharePoint sites and things like that because I know how to make SharePoint sites and give people a way to get the word out so that more people could participate and more Black voices could be heard. But as soon as the parties are listening to the people in the communities, drop the mic or pass the mic so that it's mostly the voices from within that community and it's not the white lady doing all the talking. Doing all the talking. Okay, now we want to celebrate accomplishments, right? When members of the community have a big victory, we want to make sure that they get heard and celebrated and that we make a space for that. My son just walked into the room. Hey there. Say hi to the people. He says hi to the people.
And if we've met your son, we expected that response.
Yes, we have met him. He's been to a couple of summits, so
Yeah.
yep. He's a funny one. So we want to celebrate, right? We want to be sincere in that celebration. We don't want to do it just for show. Um, we want to make sure that we're aware that seeing someone as an inspiration is kind of like looking down on them, like you're. Oh, somebody said hi to Jim. That was Chris Scott. So we want to be sincere about this. We want to make sure that when we make celebration, it's not just a like, oh, look at us, we're making diversity. We're that if we have, say, a Hispanic Heritage Month celebration, that it's sincere and that we appreciate our people with diverse backgrounds every day, not just the day that we're having a party. And the last thing that we can do is we can understand that allyship is a growing process, right? We've talked about how we can hold each other accountable. You guys can call me on my stuff. I will not use the word uppity on a t-shirt because I know that that's not a good word anymore. Or I guess never was. Thanks, Destiny. Um, and once we know better, then we can do better, right? Being self-aware is so hard, really is hard. And so we need to do this together. We need to be there for each other. We need to not be afraid to call each other out. Okay, I'm just looking at how we're doing on time. So some of the resources that I used to pull together this presentation, there's a website, Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network. They have good resources there. Many of these ideas came from the University of Virginia's Supporting Transformative Autism Research, STAR, Supporting Transformative Autism Research. They do presentations. They just had a conference that I went to on Friday. They had lots of members of the autism community doing speaking and self-advocating, and it was really, really a good conference. And EDUCAUSE has got good resources for celebrating diversity. And STC, we've got our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Panel. And if you go to that website, to that webpage, you will see the most, sorry, all the feels video. Inclusion starts with I. It starts off, people are talking about how they've been excluded. And then it just gets kind of happier and happier and happier. And like it's about a 4-minute video, and at about 2 minutes and 45 seconds, it's, the waterworks start, because it is really, really touching. Because we have all been excluded, I think, in some way. We're all uh, we're all diverse, and so we're inside some groups and we're outside other groups, and we want to make sure that we make a space so that the community is stronger because we're all in this together. There's also a Slack channel for the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and we would encourage everybody to have conversations in that Slack channel, because we don't have to just talk about this today. We can keep talking. All right. Our takeaways. I promised you that we would have some takeaways. I'm just looking at Chris's comment. This is a really good comment. He says, don't make the person be the spokesperson for all of their group. No group is a monolith. That's very well said. So we understand a little bit more about our privilege. We know who can be an ally. Trick question. You guys all got that right. And we've talked a little bit about how allyship could look. And we can continue this conversation and talk more about how allyship should look. We can go to that Slack channel and have those conversations. And this is question and answer session. And this is a picture that I love. This is the high school choir that came to Black History Month, and I got a selfie with them. But
Aw.
They were just wonderful. I loved the format of the presentation. They told a story and then they sang a song that went with that story. And it was all the feels. I mean, talked about mothers having their children ripped from them and then followed up by a soprano singing, Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. I mean, it was just, and then there was the celebration songs, that made us happy and clap. And then there were the sad ones that made us cry. That was a really great day. So questions?
All right, I have a question. Someone said to me that I was showing privilege, and I didn't understand how. So when that situation arises, do you go back to the person who said it and say, please explain to me why you think I have privilege, only not being antagonistic? Because I have a hard time, understanding what to correct.
Well, those are really hard conversations to begin with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because being self-aware is really hard. Taking feedback from other people is really hard. Giving feedback in an uncomfortable situation is really hard. I know Chris, my pastor, has had to call me out on a bunch of stuff, and I always appreciate it, but my first reaction is not necessarily joy. Um, I We sang as a congregation. We sang "Rise Up" recently, and I made slides for that. And on one of the slides, I had the photo of the police officer on George Floyd's neck. And he had to remind me that that's not my picture to show, right? Um, that
But isn't that our ultimate goal? That we are so diverse that we are all included?
Yep.
That's where we want to be, where we're not thinking about, not having to think about that part anymore.
Yeah, that is the goal.
I think we're several generations away from that state of being, and it's hard to know because you've got good examples that you were not born to use. But does that limit you to say, look, this is a good representation of this particular thought or this particular action?
Well, and that happens so gradually, right? Like
Mhm.
Italians and Irish were at one time in this country not treated well, and now it's like no big deal, right? So
Yeah, my aunt grew up in Boston where the sign said no dogs or Irish allowed in the park.
yeah,
So yeah.
so
Yeah,
I'm
that was really not so long ago. My parents were both of Italian. Well, my mother was born in Italy. Her younger siblings were born here. My father's family was the same, but he was one of the younger ones, was born here. And they had stories. I mean, they from their own growing up. So that's all of that is not really all that long ago.
yeah. It happens slowly, and I think it happens when we form relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
I
mean,
turned out to be the only white woman in an AKA investiture because my best friend invited me to hers. And it was just a whole other group of empowered women to be part of was just wonderful.
and we need to do that
Very,
whenever we can.
it's
Yeah,
been very thought provoking.
yeah. I'm loving
Thank you.
this discussion. You guys are really smart. So this is me. You're invited to connect with me. I will be emailing a PDF of all my slides. You'll get an email with the link to the recording and a link to the PDF of all my slides. So um, if you want to go back and visit some of those websites or review, or you want to continue having the conversation with me, or we want to go on the Slack channel and have the conversation. But anyway, so I'm vicky.dill@gmail.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I've got a blog. I'm she, her. I'm associate fellow. I volunteer for the Washington, D.C. Metro, Metropolitan Baltimore chapter. Well, thank you, Jamie. I volunteer for IDL. We are always looking for speakers and ideas for webinars that you would like to see. Next month, Jamie's going to present about how what her cats taught her about instructional design. So be sure to watch for getting an email to join that webinar, and then catch Jamie. Jamie's a really good speaker and smart and funny. And
Aw, thank you.
the month after, in January, we're going to have Melissa Rurik is going to teach us some tricks with Word, or she might do PowerPoint, but anyway, she's going to pick a Microsoft product and give us some tips. Robert, thank you. Robert says, so much to think about and to be aware of. I kept getting booted off today. Oh, so I look forward to reviewing the slides. And Chris Scott says, thanks to the group for letting me be part of the group. Important topic and important work. And it is. And you guys had lots of great ideas. I'm going to keep in mind to let people show me who they are and to listen better, try to listen better. So thanks everybody for coming.
Glad I did.
Thank you, Vicky.
Hey, thank you, Carolyn. I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to